Welcome everyone to the November 14th, 2023 Development Review Commission hearing. The Development Review Commission is created to hold public meetings and hearings to provide analysis and recommendations to the City Council regarding general land use policies and applications where the Commission has recommendatory power, and to render final decisions on specified applications where the Commission has final decision-making power, including but not limited to all aspects of a proposed and future development. The Development Review Commission recognizes the creation of a desirable environment throughout the city for residents, businesses, and industry is a prime requisite for the interdependence of land values, aesthetics, and good site planning by promoting harmonious, safe, attractive, and compatible development that is therefore considered to be in the best interest of public health, safety, and general welfare. Any person aggrieved by a final decision of the Development Review Commission may file an appeal to the City Council within 14 calendar days after the Development Review Commission has rendered its decision. Development Review Commission recommendations to the City Council are not final decisions. Tonight with us, we have Commissioner Larry Tom, to my right, alternate Commissioner Charles Redmond, Vice Chair Michelle Schwartz, I'm Commissioner Johnson. To my left, Commissioner Barbara Lloyd, Commissioner Linda Spears, and alternate Commissioner Robert Miller. Tonight, with staff that are with us tonight, is Jeff Tamilovich, Ryan Levake, Ambika Adkari, Chris Jasper, Joanna Berry, and Eddie Garcia. Anyone that is here to speak tonight on one of our items that we're reviewing, please fill out one of these cards and bring it up to Ms. Berry, and that will allow you the ability to come up and speak when I announce your name, and you'll be given up to 3 minutes to speak. Our staff is here to assist us in monitoring at that time. I will be going through our agenda in just a moment. One item on the agenda will be our consent agenda. And we do plan to have one item on the consent agenda. If that is an item that you were here to speak to, please make sure you fill out one of these cards, and we will pull that and hear that case as well. Okay, so on our agenda tonight, item number 1, we have the Development Review Commission 2023 Annual Report. We reviewed this in study session, and there was a request to make one modification to an item that was titled Accomplishments, and we will be changing that in the final report to Items Heard. So with that, can I get a motion for that item? Commissioner Spears?
I move for the acceptance of the Development Review Commission 2023 Annual Report.
Moved by Commissioner Spears. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Tom. All those in favor, raise your hand. Okay, and that passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda is the Development Review Commission study session and regular meeting minutes from October 24th, 2023. Is there a motion on that?
Move to approve.
That is moved for approval. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Spears. All those in approval that were here for that night, raise your hand. Thank you. And Commissioner Redmond and Commissioner Miller are abstaining because they were not there for that night. All right, so that passes with 5 in approval. Okay, next on our agenda is the consent agenda. We are tonight we have item number 4 on our consent agenda, which is Bang Bang. If there was anyone here that wished to speak about that item, please get my attention now. Okay, seeing none, is there a motion for our consent agenda? Commissioner Spears.
I move for the approval of the consent agenda.
And is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Miller. All those in favor, raise your hand. And that passes unanimously. Okay, now we move to item number 3, which is Mill Avenue Residences. Can we have the applicant please approach the dais and present your case tonight? Please state your name and city of residence.
Steve Cross, Morgan Taylor Homes. Our office is in North Scottsdale.
Welcome.
The owner of the property, my boss, also Morgan Taylor Homes, is here as well. And tonight, you'll hear a bunch of stuff related to this project. But one thing I do want to do is give you the understanding of what we're looking for. We're looking for 4 feet in the front yard under a standard use permit. So it was a pleasure meeting with city staff. If you look through your staff report on page 4, staff states that the proposal meets the development standards. Also on that page, staff states that the proposed project meets the character of the surrounding areas, to include the neighborhood character area 3, and the proposed project meets the criteria of a standard use permit, and staff is recommending approval. The use permit standard that we're asking for is to allow enough distance to have a 2-car garage. We're required to have 2 cars of parking. We can do it in a carport configuration. And if we did it in a carport configuration, we would not be here today. We would just get our building permits and build. The reason we ask for this use permit standard, 16 feet where 20 feet is required only in front of the garage, is because we want to do a 2-car garage because we think it helps in safety, security, and appearance aesthetically. So that is the subject of this meeting. You'll hear a bunch of things about we're required to have design review, et cetera. That's not the case under the guise of this application. There's no question that we can build a house as long as it meets the requirements of the city. The only exception that we're asking for is a 16 feet as opposed to 20 feet for the required front yard setback only in the area of the garage. The rest of the site meets that requirement. You'll hear the neighbors talk about the ability to do a single-story home. Our buildable footprint is 1,085 feet. Of the required 2-car parking, whether it's a carport configuration or a garage configuration, that eats up 400 square feet. So it doesn't leave us much area to build a single-story house. We have, in working with Henry Wong, the property to the north, the property that's most affected by our proposal, the property that was purchased by the subdivider of this property, so is well versed in what could be built on this property. He had recorded notification and due diligence notification when he purchased the property from Ken Muscat. I may be mispronouncing his name, but when Henry bought the property up front, the house up front, he was given numerous due diligence documents. Ken also provided those due diligence documents to us when we purchased the property. So Henry knew a house was going in. And if you look at the mayor's resolution, which is attached in your package, it's called resolution number R 2022.54. It states in there that a 2,000 square foot house may be constructed. This would have been in his title report. And we could build a dwelling up to 3,400 feet of living area, which would be very difficult to do, but it would be a number a lot bigger than the 1,374 square feet of living area that we are proposing. This is not a large house. It looks large because of the setbacks that we're constrained to, that we're meeting all of the setback requirements with the exception of the area in front of the garage. So the width of the garage, 4 feet, which would allow a standard car garage. We're honoring the rear yard setbacks that are contiguous to Mr. Wong's property. We're honoring the side yard setbacks that are required by city ordinance. We're honoring the height requirements. Our home is 25 feet, 7 inches tall. That's more than 4 feet lower than what city ordinance would allow. So our building's lower than typical. The square footage is not large, and our request tonight is just the ability to enclose that garage. If we choose to do a carport, no review here would be necessary. We could just design it and build a building permit. So I want to make sure that that's focused. Henry Wong, most being impacted by our proposal, doesn't even see the area that we're requesting, which is that front yard in front of the garage. His home is behind this home. Henry Wong doesn't even live in that house. He rents it out full-time as an Airbnb. Now, the building next to us, which I'd like to pull up on the next exhibit. Click, oh, wow, fantastic. So there have been, at our neighborhood meeting that we had about 15 attendees. They were all very nice people. Treat us very respectfully. Said we want a single-story home. So I pulled up other two-story homes, some of them of contemporary configuration. So I wanted you to see it. I mean, and you probably all know it by knowing the area, but there are numerous two-story homes in this area, and there are numerous contemporary homes in this area. This last slide that I'm showing you is Henry Wong's house up front, and it's a single-story home, but if you look at the women's center to the south, it's probably 22 feet, especially if you count the air conditioners. So Henry's going to state that we're obscuring his sunlight to the backyard. The Tempe Women's Center or Club to the south, most of your sunlight comes from the south, not the east or west, but comes from the south. There's plenty of sunlight in his backyard, even though the Women's Center or Women's Club is taller than his residence. It doesn't obscure that much light. And our building, of course, will obscure some light, but we're lower than what the ordinance would allow. And we haven't proposed our landscaping yet, but as you know, on Skybridge Maple, which you guys approved at the last hearing on the 24th, they requested two-story homes, which were required because they were subdividing land to be under your auspices. You approved 4 two-story homes, and you approved the same thing that we're asking for as use permit standard, 16 feet versus 20 feet, so they could have garages, just like we are requesting. That was approved on October 24th for 4 homes immediately adjacent to us on the opposite side of the street. So there's no homeowners association, and if we built the house without the use permit standard with a carport, we wouldn't even be before you. We would just go get design approval for the building administratively and pull building permits. So this really becomes a question of garage versus carport. We could go 30 feet tall. We're only proposing to go 25.7. We increase our square footage of livable area. We're proposing 1,375 square feet now. If you went to the mayor's resolution that I cited, they're stating 3,400 square feet or whatever. You probably couldn't achieve that, but you could achieve a number much greater than our 1,374. And that was of public record and would reflect in Henry's total report. We would prefer to have a garage because we think it's more aesthetically pleasing. We believe that it's more secure than having a carport, and we believe it would add public safety. But if we have to, we will go to the carport scenario. But we're hoping that we get your consideration, just like you did on the Skybridge Maple project directly across from us, for the garage. We meet all the required setbacks, rear and side yard setbacks. So our house meets the legal limits from Henry's rear yard. His rear yard, by design, is 15 feet deep. Our rear yard is 15 feet deep as well. That was all taken into consideration when Ken divided this property with, the city had requested that the house be preserved with a facade easement to protect its historical nature. Otherwise, this never would occur. Ken had requested that they tear down this house in 2022. And the city, working with the applicant, said you can subdivide the back of this property to build another house if you preserve this house, which wasn't protected in any other way. So it was an agreement the city provided, the mayor's resolution was recorded. Henry bought the house from the same people, same person that we bought the property. When I talked to Ken the first time, he was very thorough. We spent over an hour on the phone, and his information was very thorough. I mean, the resolution's included in your staff report, but I also have due diligence disclosures that Henry received. We want to be good neighbors with Henry and Brian, and now I just forgot his name, Blake, on the opposite side, and the Women's Club hasn't reached out to us in any way. But if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them, but I'd also reserve the right for rebuttal when the residents speak.
Thank you, Mr. Cross. Any questions for the applicant at the moment? No? Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to invite up Mr. Jasper for the staff report.
Good evening, Chair, members of the Development Review Commission. My name is Chris Jasper. I'm a senior planner here with the City of Tempe. Happy to be presenting this item to you this evening. As Mr. Cross described, the request at the subject site is for a use permit standard to reduce the front yard setback from 20 feet to 16 feet, the maximum 20%, for the proposed project at 1216 South Mill Avenue. I almost said Maple. For context, the subject site is located on the west side of Mill Avenue. The property boundaries on our GIS system haven't quite updated yet, but it would be the western half of the encircled lot. It is fronted on the south by the Tempe Women's Club. On the east is a public alley, into the north and beyond are single-family residential homes in the Maple Ash neighborhood. So this is the former site of historic property. 1220 South Mill Avenue is a designated historic property on the City of Tempe Register. So I wanted to provide a little bit of site history to kind of detail how we got from the original plat from 1924 to where we are today. So the site, when it was originally platted, featured a single-family residential home known as the Butler House property, which is its name on our historic registry. It was designated as such in 2004. Subsequent to its designation, the owner of that property submitted an application to demolish the historic structure, the Butler House property, at 1220 South Mill Avenue. This application was denied at the time, pending action and review by our Historic Preservation Commission. The HPC then denied that demolition application for a period of 180 days, during which time the city had an opportunity to talk with the property owner and come up with some potential solutions, alternatives to the demolition of the historic property. Over the intervening days and months, there was an accepted alternative, and at that time it was determined that an acceptable course of action was to approve a facade conservation easement over the property at 1220 South Mill Avenue and to waive fees for both a lot split to create the resultant lot and a zoning map amendment which essentially shifted the historic overlay from the entirety of the site to only the property at 1220 South Mill and remove it from the subject lot. At that time, the City Council adopted resolution did state that the resultant lot would be developed as a two-story home. In August of 2022, the lot split was approved, which created the lot that we are discussing this evening. And subsequent to the lot split, the zoning map amendment was approved that removed that historic overlay from the subject lot, meaning it didn't have to go through a more intensive review process with our HBC. And I've provided a copy of that resolution. It's in your staff report as well, just for context. So the request before you this evening is to reduce the front yard setback from the public alley on the west side of the subject lot. Wanted to give you a little bit of information about how this site is going to function, because I know that there are some questions about some of the functionality. So after the subject site was split, there were two dedicated easements, one 4-foot easement on the north side of the property, which will allow for water connections and access from the subject site through the property to the east for access for mail, trash, and recycling. And that easement is also available to the property owner to the east to essentially move their trash, recycling, all that stuff into the alley. So it's kind of a reciprocal easement. On the south side, there is a 5-foot easement for sewer. So those are two kind of utility connections, water on the north, sewer on the bottom, that were captured with the development. So a little bit of information about the development itself. It is an approximately 1,085 square foot project. It is a single-family residential house with 2 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms. It is 2 stories, about 25 feet in total height. It does meet our maximum lot coverage requirements. The lot area does meet our minimums for the R2 zoning district. Minimum lot area in R2 is 3,600 square feet. This is 3,667, and the proposed lot coverage is under 30%. The gross floor area, so combining all the levels of the site, would be 1,374 square feet of livable area with a 400 plus square foot garage. So that is the proposed building. As noted, 2-bed, 3-bath, over 2 stories. I did provide elevations for reference. As noted previously, the design of the subject property or the subject development is not within the purview of the application, but I did want to, provide rendering of what the ultimate product would be at the subject site. And there is a second-story patio on the rear of the property that is approximately 17 square feet in total area. Forgot to mention that. Additionally, there would be front-facing, so alley-facing porches on both the second story and first story. All of the use permit standard criteria are detailed in your staff report, so I won't get too deep into the weeds regarding the evaluation. In summary, we do not believe that these permit standard request will result in an increase to vehicular or pedestrian traffic or will result in any nuisances associated with noise, odor, vibrations, dust, etc. We do not anticipate that the proposed use permit standard, the reduction of 4 feet, would contribute to the deterioration of the neighborhood or otherwise contradict the adopted goals in our general plan. There was a question, one of our criteria that we look at is compatibility with existing structures and uses. I did want to spend a little more time on that because we do have kind of a pattern of a history of approving these types of requests throughout the area. I've detailed a number of properties in proximate vicinity of the subject site that have received use permit standard requests, variance requests to reduce required setbacks, both for, accessory structures, the principal structures themselves, including 1217 South Maple Avenue, which was the Skybridge Maple property, which received a reduction in the front yard setback from 20 feet to 16 feet for four single-family residential properties, and that is directly across from the subject site alley. Likewise, final criteria, we do not anticipate that the development would contribute to nuisances or disruptive behaviors. I did want to provide a little bit of context about some of the parking in the area, understanding that this reduction in the front yard setback is related to parking. It is intended to facilitate the construction of a reasonably sized garage that can house two vehicles, which is typically about 20 by 20 feet. That's what our typical standard is for a normal garage. So just wanted to kind of take a look at some of the parking conditions in the surrounding areas. Those properties that are denoted with gold star basically have their required parking access from the alley, meaning that they do not have a parking driveway or parking access from a typical right-of-way. And there are a number of those conditions throughout the Maple Ash neighborhood, more prominently to the north, but also as approved through the Skybridge Maple project, which is, as noted, across the alleyway, to the west. I've also noted secondary parking access areas that are available from the alley, these being properties where a carport or garage or an accessory structure is located in the rear side or rear portion of a lot that often tends to be located right on the property line. One of the tricks of our code is that setbacks from rear property lines, when they are adjacent to an alley, are actually measured from the center point of that alley. So there's a greater deal of flexibility about where those parking structures can be located. So I just wanted to provide some context there. A neighborhood meeting was required. We do have a Maple Ash neighborhood notification policy. So the applicant did hold that neighborhood meeting on October 12th from approximately 5:30 p.m. to 7 p.m. at Hatton Hall. Department staff was in attendance. I was there. There were some questions about the proposed height, the layout, some impacts to adjoining properties and walls, some of the processes related to trash, access, and mail, as well as the architecture of the building. There were additional concerns identified related to lighting in the alley, and there was a request that the alley be paved from 12th to 13th Street, and there was a stated preference for a one-story building in place of a two-story building. To date, we have received 5 emails in opposition to the project. 2 of those emails were received after the publication of the staff report, and so we're not included in there. I think they've been passed out to you. I think there might have been some additional documentation passed out just ahead of this meeting. Concerns related in those letters identified concerns with the height and the design of the project, the proposed alley frontage, and there were statements that the project was out of character with the surrounding neighborhood. Staff's recommendation for the proposed use permit standard to reduce the front yard setback is to approve the project subject to conditions. The applicant has reviewed and accepted those conditions. There are no unique conditions associated with this project, but there are typical conditions about obtaining a building permit, et cetera. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Questions for staff? Commissioner Tom?
On the garage, is there a development standard for the internal depth of that garage?
Commissioner Tom, we do have a requirement that any required parking has to meet certain dimensions, those being 8.5 by 18 feet for a required parking stall. So in practice, what we see with internal parking inside a garage is for a two-car garage, something like a 20 by 20 square foot garage.
Okay, and then on the porch to the south, because it's an open projection, that's why it's at 15 feet 1 inch, correct?
Commissioner Tom, that is correct. Yeah, open structures are measured slightly differently than
Right.
closed structures.
So that open projection on the south is actually like a foot closer to that front setback line?
Yes, that's correct. It's hard to see, but our open face structure setback is 15 feet, and the face of that porch is at 15 feet.
And then the garage, the top would be open because there's a patio up there, right? But since this is enclosed, then we have that setback, front setback requirement.
That's correct, yes. Yeah,
Thank you.
as measured from the face of the building.
Thank you.
Commissioner Miller?
I have a couple of questions regarding the alley. It is not paved, correct?
Commissioner Miller, that is correct, yes.
Is there any plan to pave it?
Yes, our engineering standards do require that if a building is going to utilize the alley as its primary drive, it has to be paved from the point of access to the northernmost, in this case, property line. I'll note, because there is another development adjacent to this one across the alley, the responsibility for paving the alley will depend on kind of who comes through with building permits first.
Also, following up on that, I'm looking at a picture that somebody provided to us. I don't know, do you have access to this one? Here, you can take a look at it.
I
if you
do
want.
not.
I'm just wondering, you're using it, they're going to use it as access, but it also shows that they've got large trash barrels there and power lines or telephone poles or something. That's going to be a fairly tight access point going in there.
Commissioner Miller?
What do they do about that? I mean, do they have to leave I'm assuming they have to leave the trash bins there because they're going to have to be picked up.
That is correct. The trash service is provided through the alleys. I'm afraid our imagery has been a little dark lately, so it's a little more difficult to see. But our typical standard for an alley width is about 20 feet. It is tight, but I'm not aware of any issues that our trash service department has identified related to pickup.
What about
beyond the
parking?
typical.
Are there not a lot? There's no parking a lot in that alley, is there?
Commissioner Miller, that is correct. Parking would have to be located outside of the public right-of-way, outside of the public alley.
So it's going to be signed that there's no parking, I'm assuming.
I'm not aware of any signage requirements. If there are any vehicles parked, that would be a code violation, however, because it would be parked in a public right-of-way without designated parking. As for signage, I'm not entirely sure.
All right, thank you.
Other questions for staff? No? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, at this time, we're going to open up the public hearing process. I have several cards here. If anyone else who has not filled out one of these would like to speak tonight, please fill one out and bring them up to Ms. Berry. When I call out your name, please come up to the podium. You'll be given 3 minutes, and if you can state your name and city of residence when you come up for the record, we'd appreciate it. All right, first up is Henry Wong.
Okay,
Afternoon, Mr. Mall.
thank you. Thank you, Design Review Commission. Thank you for letting me speak to you today.
You could state your name and city of
Yes,
residence?
sure. My name is Henry Wong. I live in Tempe. I've lived here for 36 years with my wife Sue, and we love it. We really do. And we had the opportunity to purchase the Butler House, and we're proud owners. We intend to keep it historic as is. We've invested in it inside to make it very nice, and it's kind of a magic place. Like when you go to the neighborhood, you go to the house, you buy ASU. It's like a gem, right? And I'm sure all of you know that. And so when we learned that the lot in the back was purchased and the intentions to build a two-story house, I did talk to Mr. Cross several times. I've talked to city planner Chris Jasper several times, and we all friendly conversations, And I asked them, would you consider possibly making a single-story house? Maybe go to the slides real quick. There's something called the Tempe Character Area Book, and I've met my neighbors that are sitting over here, and they've come tonight, and there's actually several authors of the book. And so we went through, though, and the thing that really stuck out at me is on the first slide is, it's on page 36, and this is the book, all 130-some pages of it. It talks about establishing neighborhood infill projects which are compatible with existing context requires an unusual degree of sensitivity and skill. And I think that's very true because we have such a ideal neighborhood right here. And so I'm asking for this committee and the planning department to consider limiting the height from 30 feet for a two-story to 15 feet for a one-story, and take another look and see what can be done with R2 zoning with respect to historic homes. On slide 3, you'll see what the home looks like today. On slide 4, my niece happens to be a digital person, and she superimposed the house in a picture, and you see that it looms over quite large. We've tried to do it to a scale as much as possible. On slide 5 is the current backyard as it is today. And slide 6 is the view of what would happen if the two-story house is built. Permanent sky is blocked. The backyard happens to be really the only place that if you want to enjoy some time with the friends or have a meal or something like that, that's kind of the only place to go. So anyways, well, thank you for your time. Yeah.
Any questions for Mr. Wong? Any questions for Mr. Wong? No? Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, next up, we have Joan Bahamond. Good evening. Please state your name and city of residence.
Yes, Joan Bamonde. I'm a City of Tempe resident, and I'm remodeling a home within the boundaries of this subject property. I have a little statement to read here, much easier. Regarding the request for a use permit standard to reduce the required front yard setback from 20 feet to 16 feet for Mill Avenue residences located at 1216 South Mill Avenue, I am writing to ask that this project not be granted the use permit standard to reduce the required front yard setback. This is yet another example of how the city and its agencies continue to allow mechanisms to override established zoning ordinances that have proven to be particularly egregious to the historic Maple Ash neighborhood and that continue to chip away at the bucolic charm and character of our neighborhood. While this request for modification of setbacks may appear benign on paper, in practice it is detrimental, particularly to immediate neighbors who will bear the brunt. Granting of this use permit will also give way for other developers to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, thank you. Thanks for coming tonight.
Thank you.
All right, next up, Ms. Karen Gitlis.
Good evening. Karen Gitlis, Maple Ash Neighborhood, North Tempe, 40-some years resident. Some of us are still interested in preserving the characteristic of our neighborhood, the oldest neighborhood in the city of Tempe. We also have questions about this product that we're looking at now and how it's justified by the city of Tempe. Problem one, commissioners, the house addressing an alley and addressed on the alley that sets a precedent because it is not at one end or the other of this particular alley. This is a precedent that should not be set. I have spoken with Ryan Levesque about this precedent before in relation to this very property. He directed my husband and I to check out an existing such project in nearby Tempe, and we did so on bicycle. The project is on McCamey Road and Roosevelt, I believe. Built by Newtown Community Development Corp. As a low-cost housing solution, it is a very presentable example consisting of 3 charming cottages. They are still hard to locate, but easier given that they are on the end of the alley that abuts Roosevelt. This is very different from a single home being located addressing an alley inside that alley and not on the edge abutting the cross street. In the case of 1216 South Mill, the house is not adjacent to the side street. It is the sole instance of a house addressing the alley without also addressing the street used in the name that should identify a very specific location on Mill Avenue, not in the alley. It will cause much confusion and possibly be confused with other 1216 locations in the neighborhood. I renew my challenge to Ryan to send me an exemplar of a house addressing an alley without also having a presence on the street that is indicated to be on. Thanks. The confusion of the street address is only the beginning of the issues that have not been addressed in this case. For example, without actually measuring, it appears that the lot coverage will exceed requirements for other instances of single-family dwellings. Where will trees and other landscape elements go? Problem 2, the apparent failure on the part of both the seller and the city to determine some of the particulars that seem not to have been resolved in writing with regard to alley improvements, landscape, lot coverage, parking, solid waste, mail delivery, etc. Problem 3, lack of design compatibility with the surroundings. This is huge. It includes the massing of this structure and the lack of elements that provide design characteristics that could tie into neighborhood commonalities. My suggestion to you is that this product is undercooked, way undercooked. Thank you very much for your time.
Any questions for Ms. Gitlis? No? Okay, thank you. All right, that's all the cards that I had. So anyone else here to speak on this tonight? Okay, that closes the public comment period. Next, I would like to invite the applicant back up to address any of the items that they've heard.
Thank you for having me back. As I showed in the earliest slide of, and I did not dig very hard, but I give you at least 5 examples of 2-story homes that have been approved in this neighborhood, some of them multiple units. And I only did the research cursorily. I'm sure if I dug deeper, there would be numerous 2-story homes. Henry stated that his niece did the photo montage, which is awesome. We actually think the house would be lower due to the power lines. We were looking at it in great detail and comparing it to the Tempe Women's Club. We think our house is maybe a little bit overrepresented because I don't think it factors in the perspective of where the house would actually physically be sited in plan view. Henry's rear yard is 15 feet. Our rear yard's 15 feet. So our rear yard would be the same depth as his rear yard. It was done by design. It was well thought out when they did the lot split. Henry bought from the original lot split subdivider with the same due diligence data that we were provided when we purchased. Some of those due diligence documents are included in your staff report. We want to work well with Henry and Brian. And we'll cooperate on perimeter fencing, vegetation, et cetera, the sewer line, the water line, the gas line. Henry's gas line goes right through the middle of our property, so we need to reroute that. We're here to be good neighbors. We understand some of the neighbors' concerns, but I don't think that based on the neighborhood meeting, and everybody was very considerate, very Gentile, they were great people, but I don't think we would receive universal agreement on an architectural style if we had chosen. When was the last time something that was done in this neighborhood didn't have opposition? I want you to think about that. I've talked to people that have been doing work in this area since the early 80s, and they stated that every project proposed in this neighborhood gets some opposition. We're just trying to do a single-family detached home, and the only area in the legal guise is the use permit standard for a garage versus carport. We could do a carport legally as designed. We would like the garage for security, safety, and aesthetics. That's why we're here, and we hope to be good neighbors. Thank you. If there are any questions of me, I'd be glad to answer.
Commissioner Tom?
Looking at the site, did you guys consider putting the garage on the south side of the property?
What's the benefit, Mr. Tom?
I think you could possibly squeeze it and meet all the setbacks. Squeeze it in.
Then it would constrain our livable space. And we're at 1374.
Yeah, you would lose.
This is going to be a $900,000 two-bedroom house. And when we heard the conversation of low-cost housing, no low-cost housing could afford the cost of building the road from 12th to 13th. None. And we could probably only do that ourselves with the cooperation of Skybridge Maple. Otherwise, we might have to wait. But that's what's before you. I hope I answered. We thought about it a little bit. I thought the architect, which was hired by us, that's done numerous homes for us, really took this footprint into consideration. The footprint's 1,085 square feet. Not large, and 400 of that's consumed by some form of parking, either carport or garage.
So there's no constraint, like there's nothing in the alley preventing you from possibly putting the garage on the south side of the building, on the south side of the lot.
Yeah, that's correct. It just would leave
You just
much
have
of a footprint to
less
the north,
livable.
right? Yeah,
Less livable area.
right,
Okay.
correct. And you could tell that it was well thought out when that minor land division was done. And if you had spoken to Kenny, you guys probably did historically, he put a lot of thought into it and preserving that house that has historic value and allowing some development land. I think that the mayor's resolution was a little bit aggressive in saying that we could have, 3,600 square feet. We're not getting anywhere close to that. But if we're forced to do a carport, we may go to 30 feet and try increasing that livable square footage some, even though it wouldn't be very much.
Anybody else have a question? Comment? Okay. I did have a question. You mentioned the carport option a few times. Have you penciled that out? What is that? Does the building itself, I assume, would look very similar?
The building wouldn't change. The only thing would be is the garage would become a carport. It would be 16 feet with a 2-foot overhang. The overhang isn't required in the setback. So it would cover the cars physically. But it wouldn't have security. It wouldn't be as aesthetically pleasing. And it wouldn't be as safe for the occupants.
And there would still be the living area above that carport?
And yeah, the living area wouldn't be altered in any way. The height may go higher. The living area possibly could increase if we increase the height of the building.
Commissioner Miller?
Just a, I guess, a point of clarification. Right now, the applicant is before us for a modification of a use permit, correct? To allow for a 16-foot as opposed to a 20-foot setback? Is that correct?
For a
Basically,
use permit standard to reduce the required front yard setback from 20 to 16
right.
feet.
So in a sense, and then with all, I share the concerns of a lot of the people in the audience to a certain extent, but that's really beside the point at this, we're talking about a very small technical change with respect to this particular property. And a lot of the rest of it's, the water's already left the dam.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Would staff like to come up and address any additional items? Mr. Jasper?
Yes, thank you, Chair, Commission. I don't know that I have any particular items to address, but I'm happy to answer any questions, should you have any, based on the public input or from the applicant's discussion.
General curiosity from me, were there ever any structures in that area historically? Or was it always just an open yard? Do you know?
Thank you, Chair. There has been some walls that were constructed in the general vicinity of the proposed building. Most recently, it had been used for vehicle parking. You can kind of see it in the aerial imagery. And again, I do apologize. We have updated aerial imagery. It's much more clear. But you can kind of see the footprint of the parking area on the western side. So it accommodated approximately 4 to 5 vehicles with a small kind of wooden fence.
So this was previously vehicle parking on
That's
on that
correct,
lot?
yes.
Okay.
So the proposed structure would be the first, house built on the subject lot.
Okay.
Andrew. I want
Commissioner
just a
Spears?
clarification. Some of us were on the commission at the time the lot split was approved and the historical overlay went on the front of the property. And so at that time, it was envisioned that this is exactly what would be coming onto this property. Am I correct?
Chair Spears, or excuse me, Chair, Commissioner Spears, that is correct. It was contemplated one day. It was contemplated as a 2-story structure at the time, yes. As kind of noted in that resolution that was approved by the City Council, that was the kind of intended outcome. And to provide a little more context, for members of the audience, any members of the commission that may not have been involved in that process, I wasn't, so I had to kind of learn about it via all the reports. There were a lot of considerations contemplated throughout that process about what the ultimate configuration of both the historic property and the subject site was going to be. And there were a lot of alternatives kind of discussed and scenarios bandied about, some of which included building a second structure on the unsubdivided lot, which would have been permitted if the previous property owner had so desired. There were concerns about how closely that second building would be located, which would have been permitted by right. And so for some context, the lot split was deemed to have the least visual impact because we had, there would be that enforced separation, a 15-foot rear yard setback on the historic property, the Butler House property, and then an additional 15-foot separation for the rear on the resultant lot. So I know that went a little bit beyond the scope of your question, but I hope it answered it.
And that lot split essentially saved that front house.
Uh,
I understand that was yeah, as you described, it was set for demolition and there was a reprieve.
Chair Johnson, yes, I would say that the lot split was intended, it was approved with the intent of preserving the historic property, and coincident with that lot split was the facade conservation easement, which was there then placed on the property to preserve it. Yes, but yeah, it was slated for demolition. And so the outcome that we have before us today is kind of the result of those discussions and those discussed alternatives.
Any other questions, comments for Mr. Jasper?
I just have
Commissioner Miller?
one question. Looking at the proposed conditions of approval, would it be appropriate to include something about paving, the required paving of the alley, and also requirements for no parking signage in that area? I know it's not allowed, but nonetheless, it doesn't hurt to reinforce it.
I wonder,
Could we do that?
parking signs in alleyways would probably set a precedent that city doesn't want to do. I would guess that would open a can of worms, I assume.
Yes, Chair Commissioner Miller. The paving of the alley will be required with the building permits and civil documents. That's an engineering standard. If we can include it, but it would be redundant because it is required per those processes. As for no parking signs, I'm not familiar, or I'm not sure if we have anything like that in similar alley conditions. I would note that parking in alleys is prohibited by code, and if there ever is anybody parking in an alley illegally, it would be a code violation. But again, I'm not sure about signage.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jasper.
Thank you. Oh, I did have something that
Yes.
I thought about. There was some statements regarding the development standards and whether or not the subject property did or did not meet those standards. I did want to kind of reiterate that we did look at the lot coverage component. We did look at setbacks on all sides, front, back, rear, and we did look at many of the operational characteristics that I detailed earlier regarding trash, sewer, mail, and access. So just want to reiterate that these are all things that we did consider when we received this application and were contemplated at the time of the lot split. So if there's any questions about any of those matters, happy to answer them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I had preemptively closed the public hearing before, but now it is officially closed. I'm still learning my regular order for how to do these things up here. All right, so public hearing is now closed. So commission discussion, anybody want to discuss further? Or I'd be willing to entertain a motion. Commissioner Redmond?
I move we.
If you can click your.
I move we approve the proposed use change.
Okay, Commissioner Redmond has submitted a motion for approval. Any other discussion, or is there a second? Second. Commissioner Spears has seconded. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And those opposed? Okay, that motion passes with 6 commissioners in the positive and Commissioner Tom opposed. All right, that closes out our regular meeting. We just have commissioner member announcements, if anyone has any. Oh,
I
Commissioner
actually have
Spears.
one. I want to remind everyone out in TV land that the Fantasy of Lights Parade is going to be the Friday after Thanksgiving. We invite everyone down to Mill Avenue to see the lights, and it's a good family event. So it starts at 6 p.m. on Friday, the 25th, I believe, day after Thanksgiving.
Great reminder, thank you. City staff announcements, do we have any?
I have none.
Okay, thank you. that convenes our meeting. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight.